Can you believe we're already at the 18th episode of Season 2? The title of this one is Imagine That, which is a semi-vague saying all things considered, but the episode literally is set inside the land of pretend, so while it may not be vividly interesting, it fits. Are you all ready for another Bubbles-centric episode? Cause this time it's gonna be all about imagination. Yep, one of the most wonderful abilities the human mind is capable of performing, and today we get to see how it manifests itself inside the genius of the Powerpuff Girls 2016 reboot.
The milkshake! They're not shaking! No.
Thank you.
This ought to be fun. The episode begins inside Bubbles' mind, where a bunch of random stuff such as literal dust bunnies, a giant candy train, a Scottish horse donkey fused with some bagpipes that surprisingly isn't Donnie, and a bunch of milkshakes are roaming around having a grand old time inside Bubbles' noggin. It's kind of what you'd expect, colorful and alive with a bunch of animals and candy frolicking all around, although I never knew Bubbles had an imaginary friend based on a Scottish instrument. Seems kinda out of left field, but hey, he's nicknamed Bagstripes, and I don't know why, but I kinda dig the name, Bagstripes. It just sounds pleasing.
Don't worry, Bagstripes! I know a shortcut!
There's also this random impersonation of the goofy laugh that Bagstripes lets out when the train goes flying off the side of the mountain, and I have no idea why it's there, but it is. Despite my preferred headcanon where Bubbles drives off the cliff never to be seen again, the reality of the fantasy depicts her safely landing the train on the ground and comes to witness that all of the milkshakes of Milkshake Junction aren't milkshaking, as told to her by Queen Schmallow. A true tragedy if I do say so myself. What will we ever do if the milkshakes don't shake?
A dust bunny disco!
Dust bunny disco, sing, sing, here we go. Dust bunny disco, dust bunny disco, dust bunny disco, sing, sing, here we go.
Bubbles, using her bubbly intuition, decides that a dust bunny disco will cure the milkshake's malaise and get them shaking again. And sure enough, it works because anything is possible with imagination. It is then that Buttercup completely snaps Bubbles out of her trance for her to realize that she was daydreaming and hurls her sister at Blossom's class presentation, releasing a ton of fire ants into the room Indiana Jones 4 style. When did Blossom start raising fire ants? Heck if I know. Honestly, the kids deserve to be devoured by fire ants if they're going to point and laugh at the girls like that. I mean, they could have died. And the best part in all this, and by best I mean worst, is that Miss Keene sends all 3 of the girls to the principal's office, not just Bubbles. I mean, I can kinda understand throwing Buttercup in the mix if Miss Keene couldn't see them in the back of the classroom and considering her past record, but what did Blossom do? She's the one giving the presentation. Why should she be punished for being the victim here? The girls leave the room and see the kid who was hanging around the lockers in the episode Secret Swapper of Doom. The episode where he gave the girls that swapper that turned into a giant monster that attacked them, which they never proceeded to go back and question at the end of the episode. You know? Forgive and forget, right? Yeah, Buttercup reveals that his name is actually Harvey, and Harvey reveals himself as him in disguise as a reminder to those who may have forgotten the ending of the aforementioned episode. Also, it doesn't take an expert to immediately notice that there's something explicitly wrong here.
Encourage her?
That's the kind of imagination one could only dream of having.
How on earth do you forget to make him's voice echo? Good lord, I don't know how the show could forget something as important and character defining as that, but sure enough, here we are. I really shouldn't be surprised at this point, but I am. I mean, the only time he didn't have the echo in the original series was the musical episode, which I'll give a pass because it's possible him singing voice with the added echo effects didn't mix well with the song. Here, there's just no excuse for it. Why is it missing? Later that night, the girls are discussing what happened earlier that day and are venting at Bubbles for getting them all detention. Again, even though Buttercup and Blossom did nothing wrong. Is it really Bubbles' fault, or is it Miss Keene's? Either way, the girls call it a night and him takes advantage of the opportunity by infiltrating their dreams once they've all fallen asleep. Gee, where have I seen this before?
What's this I hear? Tortured by the things you fear. Nighty night, girls. Pleasant dreams.
Who's ready for another ripoff episode? The girls all wake up in the same dream, or rather Bubbles' imagination, trademarked. So at least this isn't an exact replica of Paranoia, but it's still cutting it close. We aren't so much subjected to him forcing the girls to stand up against their deepest fears the way it was done with the nightmares from Paranoia, but the same idea of him warping the inside of their minds is still clearly present, as is the conclusion when, spoiler alert, the girls team up together to overcome him. I honestly don't get what him's motives are here compared to Paranoia, which makes it clear he was doing this for his own amusement and psychological torture. Here he's just achieving power by going inside Bubbles' mind, but is he doing this for the same reason? It's not exactly clear what his prerogative in all of this is meant to be. Does he just want to have fun, or is he actually trying to accomplish something? I'm not sure. But, as I mentioned, him takes Bubbles' imagination. Full-on friendship is magic style, and anyone who's seen that show will be getting major Discord vibes from this point on. Although, him's not nearly as fun of a villain in this particular episode. Bubbles becomes this dull, gray, emotionless vessel that's just plain and dreary, essentially acting like the polar opposite of her usual self. Like, I can't even begin to describe how spot on the comparison to MLP is.
Him has turned all my friends against us. Oh, I'm so scared.
Him takes over and causes all of Bubbles' imaginary friends to become evil, with the Dust Bunnies growing fangs and Queen Schmallow becoming this demonic purple mattress that doesn't seem to have any trouble at all knocking Buttercup down because of how pathetically weak she is. Though luckily Blossom fights back and sends her flying with her eye lasers no problem. This buys the girls enough time to escape into a random door of a supply closet where they contemplate their next move.
Think of something!
Okay, I'll try. I got nothing.
With Bubbles basically out of the picture, Blossom encourages her sister that in order for the two of them to beat him, they have to out-imagine him at his own game. This causes Buttercup to imagine a hamburger turtle who gives wise sagely advice. And by wise sagely advice, I mean he just says keep imagining things and they'll win. I think the adjectives straightforward and logical are more apt to the kind of advice he provides.
Buttercup, you did it! You imagined him with your imagination.
Huh. Imagine that.
Next, we witness him commit murder as he devours the delicious insides of this milkshake cup, prompting Blossom to reveal herself as the new and improved Office Valkyrie. With her pen is mightier than the sword, her retractable, protractable wings of order, and her pie chart shield. You know, two of those things are math-related items. Need I remind you that if we are to go by the established canon that this show has laid out for us, it's out of character for Blossom to have mathematical items because Buttercup is the girl who's advanced in math now. Blossom is only good enough to be in regular math, as we've seen in the episode Buttercup vs. Math, so by the show's own standards, this is incorrect and out of character. Of course, I'd be giving the show credit right now by giving Blossom items that relate to her interests and making a weapon set out of them in the process, but oh, I guess I can't do that because of Buttercup vs. Math, now can I? You know, need I remind you that this is also taking place in the mind of a coder, and yet there is not a single computer programming reference to be found? Imagine that. I originally had thought that since this is Bubbles' fantasy we're dealing with here, whoever possessed her imagination has control over everything. But then Buttercup and Blossom have the ability to imagine their own things because this is all interconnected now. And I mean, that makes sense considering that all three of them are currently conscious within the same dream, but if the possibilities are endless, then the ideas Blossom and Buttercup ultimately settle for are really underwhelming. Blossom became the Office Valkyrie as I mentioned earlier, and Buttercup dishes out Laser Eagle, an eagle mech suit that shoots lasers. Him sicks the candy critters on the Powerpuff Girls in retaliation, and the two sides collide, yielding mixed results. I mean, they're just dust bunnies that poof away, so it's not really all that exciting to watch. Blossom does at least murder the bagpipe donkey horse, so that's a positive though.
Good job. He was always my least favorite.
With all of his forces defeated, him resorts to taking matters into his own hands and transforms into a literal train monster that the two girls have to face off against. Although they both fail to defeat him, which lures him into a false sense of security.
I'm filing you under P for pathetic.
Yeah, I'd do the same, honestly. Certain of his victory, him gloats to Blossom as he prepares to bring their demise when she begins to toy with him as a distraction, constantly cutting back and forth between the two as Buttercup gets gradually more and more tired until she straight up passes out from boredom. Also, I don't know if the train connection was intentional or not, but this isn't the first time him's been associated with being a conductor. During all of this back and forth between the two, Bubbles managed to sneak up behind him, steal the hat, and regain control of her imagination. In other words, I guess you could say him lost his train of thought. How did Bubbles manage to ultimately defeat him and stop his reign of terror? Well, by becoming the literal fucking sun. Thus, him is vanquished entirely from her fantasy realm, and all of the milkshakes are saved from the suppression and allowed to party once again. Well, all but one of them at least.
Let's do it for Joey.
Yeah, whatever happened to him?
Not Joey the Unicorn, not Big Joey, not Joey the Camp Director, but Joey the Milkshake. Why is everybody named Joey? The girls wake up from their slumber and apologies are made to Bubbles, stating that there's nothing wrong with having a great imagination. Well, whatever. The three of them still have detention anyways, but it's all good because the three end the episode in laughter as they continue to imagine themselves having a fun old time. Personally, if you ask me, this whole plot felt more like an Allegro scheme than a him scheme, to be honest. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but it would have made more sense for the giant stupid panda to do this, all things considered. Overall, I'm kinda disappointed that the episode didn't really push the boundaries of fantasy and animation. I mean, seriously, both mediums provide the capability for anything to be possible, which gives twice as much of a reason to wow us with some unique ideas that really shine with creativity. But this didn't really blow me away much at all. It would have been awesome had the show either switched up the character designs or animation style or something, but nah, it's just colorful and that's it. I wouldn't say this episode is the worst thing out there though. I mean, there's been far worse this season, so by comparison, it's decent enough, I guess. Which is surprising because I expected this episode to be way worse, honestly.